Singleton is a British stone carver who combines her innate creativity with a fascination with geology to produce graceful and romantic sculptures, relief carvings, and letter carvings. I visited with her at her studio in Newton Abbot in Devon, where she shared her inspirations, philosophy, process, and passion for her art and craft. Hi, welcome to Flip the Lens, my labor of love. Are you seeking inspiration? Curious about creativity, culture, and the human condition? Then you've come to the right place. I'm Meg, founder of Flip the Lens. Here, we produce short interviews and documentaries that shine a light on what is good about people and culture. Our mission is to celebrate our unique differences and our shared humanity. Flip the Lens stands for authenticity, belonging, curiosity, and respect. Our goal is to inspire, engage, and foster a sense of connection. We bring you interviews with fascinating people from all corners of the globe who share their lifestyles, traditions, art, and culture. We also feature many documentaries on the history and culture of locales around the world. Flip the Lens also welcomes films by contributors. Email us at submissions@flipthelens.com. Otherwise, we hope you'll subscribe and that you'll enjoy the channel. And now it's time to meet Zoe.
I've always been involved in creative activities. Yet the story of my stone carving probably goes back to quite a long time ago when I was at school. When I left school, I won 2 awards. One was for 3D art, which was mainly sort of ceramics and constructing things, and the other was for geology. And it took me probably 20 years to put the two together, because when I was at school they didn't suggest girls went into stonemasonry. Ironically, my brother became a stonemason, and there's probably something in the family. My dad worked in quarries. I spent a lot of my childhood and teenage years when I wasn't making things. I was sort of digging for fossils and finding really interesting things in the ground. Whenever I was at a beach, I would always be looking up at the cliffs rather than at the sea, and I've always had a huge love of rocks and stone. Yeah, I'd always worked creatively and in a sort of 3D work with ceramics, textiles and things, and as I said, I'd always, because of my past with geology, I'd always wanted to carve stone. And it wasn't until probably about 12 years ago that I got the opportunity to have a go at carving stone. And from that point on, my life changed completely. And I just fell in love with the medium. So I did a couple of courses, just sort of basic stone carving courses, and then just sort of followed my own instinct into finding my own way through the stone. I did a lettering course with John Nielsen, who I think is probably the letter carver, and that was great, and really opened my eyes to the real sort of potential of lettering in stone. And that was probably the best course that I did with regard to that, and then I've just sort of worked on my own sort of instinct after that, really. Stone carving compared to doing something like that's also 3D in ceramics is stone carving is a reductive process, so you're always sort of taking away, while ceramics is constructive. And what I found, that I think one thing that I really loved about stone carving was this reductive process, that it kind of controls what you do. You have the block of stone, you can only, that limits you and controls the sort of shape and the size, and then it's up to you to find it out by taking away rather than adding to it. And I found for some reason my head seemed to really work well with that reductive process rather than a constructive process. Obviously for letter carving, poetry works so well because it's succinct and short, and sometimes I think the shorter the better. And I really love poems that capture the essence, a real sense of a feeling or a sense of place. So then I'll be going to the sort of drawing phase, and I'll draw out the letters. I use sort of sketchbooks, and but I also keep letters that I really like. So when I find letters, I add versions of letters, I add them to my sketchbook. So if I need an interesting letter, or just don't quite feel inspired, there's a whole raft of E's and C's and A's and things. I'll come back to them, and then I'll draw things out on paper. It's a bit of a drawing of the tide rises. I can't remember how many times I drew that piece out before I actually did it. That's the sort of one that might progress. That was a song line that somebody gave. I was working on this piece, and I always work from the bottom up to the top because you don't want to smudge all your writing. So I had all this piece written on, and I was working on that, and I just didn't like the R on here. And literally, as I was about here, I suddenly thought, oh, I'll put a little curl on the end of the R. And up to then, I had it all written out with a different shape R that was possibly going to go across, and it was literally right at the last minute when I put that little curl in there. You know, there are always alterations to be made, and so it's sort of really only formed when the whole piece is together. And I really like lettering in the garden. I try to convey the spirit of the piece within the letters. For example, this one is the tide rises, the tide falls. Obviously what I've tried to do is make the lettering move, and it's all about the sea, and so you've got almost like a background that looks like sand, and maybe on the beach and things. So it has a real sense of movement and flow within the words, and fits nicely in the piece. I like to put the letters together so they move across the piece. And all my pieces, the lettering is all designed by hand. I never use a computer. Every letter is individually designed and carved to the piece. Somebody once said to me about, you know, your letters dance across the page, and I thought that was just such a beautiful thing to say. I find great sanctuary in the garden, and I feel the garden is where my work is centred. Obviously, from the plants that grow in my garden are often replicated into the pieces here, but also some of the poetry that I use, I feel really relates to the garden. There's a lovely poetry piece that I often cut a few times for quite a few people, which is Ted Hughes from the Four Quartets, which is called At the Still Point of the Turning World. And I think that really sums up how I feel about the garden, that it's in everything that's going on in the world and everything, the garden is the still point, it is the sanctuary, and that's where I find my peace. And so I feel that inspires my carving. I love growing plants and nurturing them from seed, and I suppose there's a sort of synergy to that with the carving and sort of creating something. That you start with something that doesn't look much, and then it grows. The more you work at it, it grows into something quite beautiful, and there's a synergy between that and carving. This is a piece I'm currently working on, which is a commission for a customer. This is going to France, to the Low Alps, Low French Alps, as you can see in the picture, and it's representative of all the plants that live in the area. La Ruche means the beehive, so it's actually going to have 3 bees carved into it, but they've got to come on a bit later. And it's also got to have some clouds in the background. So this is work in progress at the moment. But one of the specifications of this piece was that it was botanically correct. So we've got alpine strawberries, some alpine thistles, foxgloves, harebells, more thistles, daisies, oak grass. All these plants are botanically correct to the low French Alps, and there's going to be lots of grass and a path coming down there. Dartmoor is a huge expanse of open land, but it's a huge slab of granite that was once a volcano that existed in this area. So it has a great granite base, which means it's raised higher than all the surrounding lands. And within that there are old quarries, there are even granite tram lines that run across the moor, which are fantastic to go and visit, where they took the granite from Dartmoor and then took it out to the sea at Teignmouth and to London. The Jurassic is the coastline where the sandstones and limestones came up, and that's where you find lots of the fossils, particularly on the east side of Devon and going into Dorset. That's where the fossil-rich beds are, and they're in limestone and shales and things like that. The granite from Dartmoor is something that's probably older than the Jurassic coast, and was sort of a very old volcano that the sort of magma basically that set. And and also Bodmin moors as well. There are also patterns and rhythms to the different aspects of carving stone. When you're using heavy mallets, there'll be a certain pattern and a certain rhythm that you use, which will be different from the rhythm that you use when you're doing letter cutting. And these have different rhythms, which I suppose are patterns that affect you, that are the noise of your work that you see when you're carving. I've used quite a lot of hexagon patterning. These are sort of been reflecting bees and the links between bees and flowers, and the fact that one can't exist without the other. So I've been doing lots of sort of hexagons and patterning those. But pattern is important. There are lots of patterns and rhythms that we see all the time in nature that I think come into play in my work. It's all about light and shadow, and when you start putting pattern in, you can create some different textures into the stone which define characteristics that you might want to highlight and areas that you might want to make a difference to. So yeah, I find pattern works quite well with stone because of the lack of colour. Normally I like a few weeks to take a piece from idea to completion. I usually have several pieces of work on the go at the same time. If I'm working on a sort of sculptural piece and sort of roughing out, I'll be working on that a little bit because that's quite hard and physical. And then I might have something like this that I'm doing at the same time. So I'll do a bit on that, and then I'll have a bit of an easier go on something like this piece. So I tend to have various pieces on the go at the same time. If I hit a wall with something, I tend to just put it aside. I mean, a couple of weeks ago I hit a wall with this piece. I couldn't work out what was going on here and things in it. It just, what I'd planned wasn't working. So I just popped it aside, popped it on the easel, got on with some other pieces, and then suddenly it came to me, and then I was able to sort of sketch it in and have a think about it, and then I got it back. I'm back on track with it, which is good because my customer's back from France. carving is a totally sensory experience. It's your eyes, it's your ears, it's touch, and touch is incredible to it. You're constantly, particularly if I'm carving something three-dimensional, you're constantly feeling the stone, and you can feel if a curve is slightly out of line just by touching. It might look it fine by your eye, but actually when you rub your hand over it, you will know that that is wrong, or there's a lump in it or something. And so you're always standing back, looking, using all your senses to create the piece. Yeah, so it does take you into the zone, and the same with the drawing processes as well. They can also, you know, when you're trying to figure out the balance of letters and words, that can also get you sort of in zone. But I wouldn't say it's sort of consciously meditative, but it certainly takes you into that zone that everybody talks about. And it's often quite, you know, it often throws up, every time you start a new piece, there's always new challenges and new things to learn almost, you know, every time. I mean, as you're carving along, particularly when you're starting a block, you can hear if it's got a fault, and you don't want to ignore that noise. Stones have certain rings to them and sounds to them. So as you're working along, if that sound goes dead, you know there's a fault in the stone, and you don't want to be going any further with it. When I'm teaching, I can sometimes tell whether people are carving correctly by the rhythms and the sounds that they're making on the stone. If I can hear them if they're doing it incorrectly, and so it's often my ears rather than my eyes that are telling me that somebody's doing something wrong. The Waymarker project was an Arts Council funded project that I did just after lockdown, the COVID lockdown in 2020. This was a piece that was all about representing the diversity of all the medical staff in the local hospital, which was Torbay Hospital, and giving them representation in their garden, which is the staff space. So we polled all the people in the hospital and asked them to provide their most meaningful words in their own language and in their own hand. So they'd have their handwritten and in their own language. And we eventually I used about 20 languages and created 5 stones that form part of a trail. And these look a bit like old-fashioned Waymarker stones that you have in around England that point the direction to places. But what these have on them, they're a trail around the staff gardens and near the nursing homes where the staff live. What they have is all words that they chose, and it was really nice to be involved in a project where actually, rather than me coming up with the words, I was given words to carve, and people just sent me such lovely passages about why these words were meaningful for them, and you know how happy they were to have them carved in stone on the thing. This piece here was a bit of a follow-up from the project. One of the doctors sent me this word here, which is these 5 symbols across here, which is happiness in Tamil. And I really loved the shapes of it. This kind of relates back to what you're talking about, pattern, and it was just nice to carve something. So this word is on one of the stones. I think it's called the happiness stone. So it has lots of words in different languages that equate to happiness. But I really liked this, and so I decided to translate this into a sort of pattern, and I've called it happiness times 5, because this is happiness, and then it comes around 5 times, almost like a meditation on happiness. And I just thought it worked really well as a pattern. personally, I don't like to pigeonhole myself into any particular box. I see some things I do as being very artistic and some things I do as artisanal. And so I like to think I cross the boundary between both of those words, and I wouldn't want to pin myself to either camp. I think the artistic side, it certainly comes out with the sort of the creating and the drawing and the development of ideas. The artisanal side is definitely a sort of practice of carving that, you know, has to be worked at, and, you know, it's not something that is just sort of spontaneously thrown, you know, and it's being constantly improved and developed. And so that's where I see is the, you know, this is a skill that I'm working on and continually developing. So that's the artisanal side of it. And I combine that with the artistic side, which is the development of ideas and the drawing practice side of it. Fundamentally, I'm a huge fan of British stone. The main stone I use for my sculptural work is Portland stone, which is, which I touched on earlier, which holds detail really well. This comes from the south coast. It takes me about an hour to get to Portland. So I usually take my van down there and load up direct from the quarries in Portland. I also use Bath stone for teaching because it's a really nice soft stone, and that comes from the city, around the city of Bath. And that's a lovely soft stone which is great for teaching with, and people can really make good progress there. A lot of the letter cutting I use is Welsh slate. Really love Welsh slate for letter cutting. I've tried other slates, and it's like, Welsh slate is like silk compared to all the others that might be cotton. It is just much smoother, has a much nicer finish, and carves beautifully. Yeah, I went to goldsmiths. I think there's certainly a creative vibe in the air there that affected everything and affected the way I feel about creativity. I think it's more about the thinking and the mindset that overrides the place. And I think that filters into you and can come out in lots of different ways. And I think maybe I still hold on to some of the values that I gained there now. Was there a moment that creativity defined my life? I think it's a slight twist on that. There's more a moment where not being creative defined my life. There's been a couple of moments in my life where I haven't been able to be creative, and they've made me profoundly understand that creativity is essential to the core of my well-being. I've always sort of made things from a child to a teenager, made my own clothes, and all sorts of things all throughout my life. But there's been probably 2 periods in my life where I wasn't able to, for one reason or the other, and they caused me profound distress. And so I know that it's absolutely essential in my core to create. It felt like I was just missing something so profound in here, that like a piece of me had been taken away, and I had to put that jigsaw piece back to be a complete person. And that's kind of what creativity is to me. When there are creative things to do, I'm always happy. When I can't be creative, I'm not a happy person.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Seeking out positive content is a choice, and it's an investment in self-care. I know that what I feed my head directly influences how I think and feel. Travel, photography, and uplifting quotations are 3 ways I maintain perspective, focus on the moment at hand, and see the beauty in the everyday. These pastimes all came together for me in a digital 365-day perpetual calendar I created. The images featured include poignant and compelling portraits, still lifes, and scenes that span every ecosystem. Those quoted represent a breadth of cultures and spiritual movements. Timeless insights are from philosophers, political leaders, writers, comedians, musicians, poets, artists, and others, from the BC era to today. This digital 365-day perpetual calendar features observations on themes such as attitude, belonging, creativity, culture, mindfulness, nature, and spirituality, among many others. Make an investment in positivity and buy your copy today. Your purchase will help support the Flip the Lens channel. Thanks!